My name is Austin Schrack, and I am a student at Southeastern University. This project is a cross-cultural analysis between Cuba and the United States. The objective of this project is to give an expatriate American manager an understanding of working in Cuba and with the Cuban people. We'll start with a brief overview of Cuba and geographical characteristics of the island. Also discuss some of the historical and political factors that affect a person living in Cuba today. We will then take a look at Hofstede's six-dimension cultural model to compare the differences and similarities between the U.S. and Cuba. The goal is to approach this business endeavor into Cuba from the perspective of a Christ-like manager and leader. Cuba is rich with history, and Cubans hold firmly to their family traditions, which have endured many generations. The national language in Cuba is Spanish, but English, Creole, and French are also spoken. Individuals who are in tourism, especially the younger generations, often speak several of these languages. Roman Catholicism is the national and predominant religion of Cuba, with Protestant and African religions following. Cuba is a Caribbean island country located 90 miles south of Key West, Florida. The island is west of the North Atlantic Ocean and southeast of the Gulf of Mexico. The island is approximately 42,000 square miles with an illustrious sequence of beaches spanning over 3,500 miles of coastline. Much of Cuba consists of flat, rocky terrain, but there are also many areas with fertile farmlands and other areas with very steep, mountainous, and rainforest-like terrain. There is a lot of natural beauty in Cuba, from their superb beaches to their crystal clear waters of their coral reefs. It is truly a breathtaking place to experience. With an increased focus on tourism and leisure travel, they work very hard to keep the beautiful places clean and beautiful the best they can. With that said, much of the island is poverty-stricken and does not get any tourist attention whatsoever, which makes it even harder for them to get out of their financial situation. Here is a picture of a main street in Havana, the capital of Cuba. The Capitol building of Cuba can be seen in the background, which reflects the construction style of the U.S. Capitol building in Washington, D.C. On the other side of the street, you can see the illustrious, vibrant colored buildings, which is representative of most of the architectural design detail in Havana. The island of Cuba was discovered, so to speak, in 1492 by Christopher Columbus. At that time, there were already indigenous people living there, but they were killed off by the newly introduced diseases and battles with the Spanish colonizers. Skipping forward in history, the 20th century brought huge change for Cuba. Politically speaking, Cuba was strategically backed by the Soviet Union as an ally beginning in the 1940s. Fulgencio Batista was the elected president of Cuba at that time. His administration had a lot of success, but became extremely corrupt. Fidel Castro, a young Cuban lawyer, created multiple failed uprisings against Batista from 1953 to 1959, known as the Cuban Revolution. These uprisings carried on until Batista finally fled the country in 1959. Fidel Castro quickly assumed control of the government and military and became a dictator and a tyrant to the people. The single-party Castro administration has been in power since 1959 and is now run by Fidel's brother, Raul Castro. The independent Socialist Republic continued to be backed until the fall of the Soviets in 1991. The people of Cuba have experienced a lot of poverty, turmoil, and disillusionment as the result of the struggles since 1959. Leading to many people leaving or attempting to leave the country. The National Hotel in Havana is a rich piece of Cuban history, of which all people of importance who visit Cuba go to stay. This hotel was built in 1930 and has been well maintained since then. This hotel was the headquarters of Fidel Castro during the latter portion of the Cuban Revolution. We are now going to jump in to discuss some of the comparisons of the U.S. and Cuba through the lens of Hofstede's six-dimension cultural model. The six dimensions of Hofstede include power distance, individualism versus collectivism, masculinity versus femininity, uncertainty avoidance, long-term versus short-term orientation, and indulgence versus restraint. Individualism measures the degree of how much people are integrated into groups. That means there's a feeling of we or I. As can be seen in the graph, the United States scored very high in being individualistic with 91 out of 100. In contrast, Cuba scored an average of 30 out of 100, making them lean significantly toward the collectivist side. Similar to most people in Latin American cultures, the Cuban people have strong ties with family and friends, generally exhibiting selfless characteristics to better the people around them. As a manager in Cuba, I would benefit greatly by being open and personal with employees and embracing the team-oriented work styles. In Hofstede's model, his masculinity dimension refers to the level of acceptance and adherence to defined emotional gender roles, with men being assertive and tough, and women being submissive and tender-hearted. Both countries scored similarly, with the U.S. at 62 and Cuba at 65 out of 100. As a man managing in Cuba, one would exhibit confidence in decisions and garner respect through an example of hard work ethic. The United States and Cuba are very similar in their results in uncertainty avoidance, based off of this information. I would score Cuba with a bit lower of a number in this category, as they are culturally very outside-the-box thinkers. Cubans are often willing to take risks and deviate from norms relative to the average American. Both countries, however, scored mildly and are relatively tolerant to ambiguous or unregulated situations. A manager should allow informal and spontaneous communication with employees, but also make clear deadlines for when projects need to be completed. The time orientation dimension reflects the level that individuals exhibit practices that lead to a future reward. Both the U.S. and Cuba's scores exhibit short-term or normative characteristics. The scores for the U.S. and Cuba in this dimension are 26 and 13, respectively. The cultures from both countries are relatively short-term oriented by nature. As a manager, it would be productive to offer frequent incentives for good productivity with the reward immediately following the desired outcome. The last dimension, indulgence, stands for a tendency to allow relatively free gratification of basic and natural human desires related to enjoying life and having fun. The U.S. scored high in this with an average of 68. Cuba's score indicates them being more limiting with their behaviors, with a score of 54. This could be indicative of the correlation of economic status between each nation and the results. It would be beneficial for management to provide the opportunity for employees to take flexible time off from work to disconnect for personal leisure and renewal. In reflection of some of these points, from a biblical perspective, I'm going to read Luke 6, verse 31. It says, "And just as you want men to do to you, you also do to them likewise." This is a simple but very solid reminder of how we are to be examples of Christ. As Christians, we are called to higher standards. We have the responsibility to act in a Christ-like manner. Whether I am the president of a company or the person who sweeps the floor at night, I am instructed to love other people. What better way to build a team than by genuinely loving and caring about them? Whether or not you plan to pursue an international business venture into Cuba, we are nonetheless experiencing increased contact with Cuban people. There has been an influx of Cubans into the U.S., specifically South Florida, where they have established a vibrant Cuban community. This influx not only increases business connections in Cuba, but also here in the U.S. Thank you for watching this presentation. I hope this information was helpful. God bless.